Welcome back, kids. Did you enjoy that story? All right, we're now going to move to another one, this time from South Africa. It's about a king with a ring. And in that ring lay all the secret of his power and his greatness. The ring was made of gold brought up the river Nile, inlaid with silver brought up the river Congo, and topped with diamonds brought up by the river Zambezi. So the story goes. Though exactly where the ring came from, no one knows for sure. The ring was so powerful that whoever wore it was protected from all mortal danger. That meant that no matter how many people were charging around the corner, waving spears and axes and shooting arrows, the king could never get hurt. Provided, of course, that he was wearing his ring. So the king wore the ring at all times. While passing judgment in his court, while eating stupendous feasts that lasted all day, while being carried on a special sort of bed covered with ostrich feathers through the streets of his city. Even while sleeping in his royal bedchamber at night. The king wore the magic ring every hour of every day, except when he went for his ceremonial bath. Now on these occasions, the king was carried to the crystal clear pool beside the waterfall. There, all his servants and his children and his many wives bowed low to him, and then they backed away out of sight. Once they had left, the king would take off his crown of gold and ivory and peacock feathers, his cloak of gold and silk and precious stones, his sandals of ebony and rhinoceros hide, and his robe of the purest white linen. And then he would take off his ring and hide it in a place so secret, so well concealed, that not his servants, not his children, nor even his many wives could make the slightest guess as to where it was. And as soon as the king finished his royal bath, before he allowed anyone to come near him, he put the ring back on. First thing, he treasured the ring because it made him the most powerful king in all of Africa. But the day arrived when he stepped, dripping out of his ceremonial bath into the warm sun, and to find that the ring was not there. At first, with amazement, and then with fear, the king searched his secret hiding place, and all around it, the ring was gone. Someone among all his servants and his children and his many wives, someone must have discovered the hiding place and dared to take the ring. The king was furious. But he was also afraid. If he offered great rewards for finding the ring, then everyone would know that he no longer had it. They would know that he was no longer protected from harm. They would know he was no longer the most powerful king in all of Africa. For days, the king sat and worried. He paced up and down in his private chamber. He sat for hours staring at the ground or at the sky. He couldn't sleep. All his wives shook their heads in sorrow, and his children kept well away. It was his favorite wife that persuaded him to tell her what was wrong. Immediately, she went to the house of the wisest of all the diviners, a man called Zafusa. With wild eyes and bracelets jangling on his arms, Zafusa sprang into the courtyard where the king was sitting. Plumes of feathers danced and waved in his headdress, and strips of furry skin dangled from his waist. He looked like a feathered leopard with 100 tails. He listened silently while the king explained about the stolen ring. Then Zafusa opened up one of the leather pouches that hung from his beaded belt and took out the set of bones that he used to find the answers to difficult questions. Smoothing a circle in the sand, Zafusa held the bones towards the sky, gave a sharp cry, and dropped them. Carefully, he examined the pattern in which they lay. Then Zafusa straightened up and looked at the king. "Your ring will be found, Your Majesty," he said. "The thief is close to us." "Who is it?" demanded the king. Zafusa shook his head. "You will see. You will not need magic. Send for your woodcutters." The king did so at once, and Zafusa explained to them what was needed. At dawn on the next day, all those who could possibly have had the slightest chance to steal the ring were gathered in the great square, in front of the palace. The king appeared at the top of the steps, leading down from the front door, and stood there, staring silently at the bowing people. Then he clapped his hands, and soldiers appeared all around the square, armed with sharpened spears so no one could escape. Through a small archway appeared Zafusa, all the more terrible, now with white circles around each eye and strange dark designs on his body. After him came the woodcutters with great numbers of straight wooden sticks. They heaped the sticks in the center of the square. Zafusa danced around the sticks, chanting in a language nobody had ever heard before, and it was clear, even to the smallest child, that he was casting a spell on the sticks. Finally, at the king's command, everyone in the square was given one stick. "Take care," thundered Zafusa. "These sticks are full of power. Do not lose them. Have them with you all through today. Bring them back here at dawn tomorrow. As the sun rises, we shall see what we shall see." Sticks of power! All the people were amazed. The sticks looked so ordinary. They compared sticks with each other. They all looked just the same. A few were a little thicker or thinner, but they were all the same length. In fact, they were all exactly the same length. How curious. The guards moved aside, and the servants, children, and wives were allowed to leave, shuffling backwards, of course. No one ever turns their back on the king. So they all saw the king beckoning with a finger to his favorite wife. As she knelt before him, he whispered in her ear, "The thief is as good as caught. the stick will catch him. This night, the stick of the thief will grow in length by the breadth of 3 fingers. But don't tell anybody I said so. As he strode into the carved doorway, all the wives, children, and servants crowded around the favorite wife to find out what the king had said. Now, the favorite wife was a very careful woman. She didn't breathe a word to any of them, except to her own extra special friend. That friend was a trustworthy woman too, and she only told her mother and her wise old aunt. But the strange thing was that by the time the sun had set that evening, every single person who had been in the square knew that by dawn, the thief's stick would have grown by the length of 3 fingers. Night came as swiftly and as silently as it always did. When the first tinges of dawn showed that the night was over, the crowd gathered in the square and they all had their sticks. The sun crept up into the sky and suddenly there was Zafusa, a gleaming spear in his hand, glaring at all the people. The king appeared, being carried on his own special traveling bed with the ostrich feathers. And beside him walked the chief builder in the kingdom, bearing his measuring rod. Stick after stick was measured all the way around the square. Not one of them had grown so much as a fingernail in length. But there was one stick that was exactly the thickness of 3 fingers shorter than anyone else's. "There's the thief!" shrieked Zafusa, leaping high in the air and waving his spear, ordering the royal guards into action. "Feed him to the lions!" The thief promptly forgot that the ring protected him and fell to his knees and cried and pleaded. He took off the ring from the hand he had been hiding and gave it to the king and cried some more and begged for mercy. And the king was so pleased to have his ring back and to be the most powerful king in all of Africa once more that he allowed the royal lions to go without their breakfast. The thief was set free. Free, that is, apart from a small punishment. He had to run around the city 3 times, and the children chased him all the way around all 3 times, and they found quite a different use for their sticks. "How did you manage that?" asked the king as he was recovering in his private chamber, and Zafusa stood watching bag after bag of gold being brought from the king's treasury. "Your magic must be even stronger than the magic of the ring." "Not so," said Zafusa. "I told you I would not need magic. All it needed was one very guilty man." He knew so well that he was the thief that he really believed his stick had grown 3 fingers in the night. So he cut off that length and thought no one would notice. Zafusa tied up the bags of gold in a spare sheepskin that he had the foresight to bring with him and bowed once to the king. "There is more than one kind of magic, Your Majesty." Kids, what do we learn from this story? Again, not to lie. Again, not to steal. And again, if you do, apologize.